this week's Torah portion, Moses sends 12 spies to search out the land of Canaan. They are to scout the length and breadth of the country, to see what kind of country it is, what the people, towns, and countryside are like. They go into the land at the time of the autumn harvest and cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, so heavy that it has to be carried on a frame by 2 men, and they bring back some pomegranates and figs. This is a land flowing with milk and honey, they say, but the people who inhabit the land are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. Giants dwell in the land, and the country devours its settlers. The people there are so large that we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them. This week, the conference of liberal rabbis and cantors met for their regular monthly meeting. We were joined by the head of communications from the Israeli embassy, Ohad Zemet, and after some introductory remarks from him, we were able to question him on a number of issues, including the so-called US peace plan, which includes the extension of Israeli sovereignty into a stretch of land known as the Jordan Valley in the occupied territories. What is this plan? What will it mean for Israel? What will it mean for the Palestinians? And how should we respond to it as liberal Jews? The Israeli government describes what might happen on July the 1st as an extension of Israeli laws into the West Bank. Others call it annexation. Whatever we call it, makes clear where we position ourselves on the question of the fate of the Palestinians and the issue of claiming land that is part of a military occupation in the West Bank. The 22.3% of land designated for annexation by the Trump plan stretches from the northern edge of the Green Line, just south of the Kinneret, Lake Tiberias, south along the River Jordan to the Dead Sea, stopping at an area that is parallel to Hebron. According to B'Tselem, the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, 65,000 Palestinians and about 11,000 Israeli settlers live in the area. 20% of the land is Palestinian owned. Mr. Zemet from the Israeli embassy told us that this extension of Israeli law, as he called it, should be viewed in the context of Trump's overall peace plan. He said, "This is not yet government policy." He mentioned the fact that part of the occupied territories, the area known as Area C, is already under the Israeli coordinator of government activities in the territories. He mentioned the notion of land swaps, compromise, the 1967 Israeli offer of citizenship to citizens of East Jerusalem, already annexed by the Israeli government. Citizenship, he said, that most people didn't want to take at the time. Now, he said, that trend is different. People seem to want to take Israeli citizenship. He cited the Golan Heights, another area of annexation, where the Druze population also did not take Israeli citizenship, but remained there as permanent residents. Several of my liberal colleagues asked questions. What would be the nature of citizenship offered to those living in the potentially annexed areas? If citizenship were granted, would Palestinians have freedom of movement? What would the Palestinians receive as a land swap for the Jordan Valley? What's the next stage after the extension of law into this area? How do you answer those questions when the premise on which they are based, that the occupation is wrong and that annexation is wrong, is denied by respondents? We need to support the integration of Arab citizens of Israel, said Mr. Zemet. Travel restrictions were abolished in the 1960s. We have only one class of citizen in Israel. These answers, I regret, avoided the real issues of the fate of the Palestinian population in the occupied territories for now and the future. For the only future for Israel and Palestinians is a shared future. Annexation of any part of the occupied territories would be contrary to international law. It would kill off completely a commitment to the two-state solution. It would be a unilateral move that silences the Palestinian voice completely. It would endanger the peace treaties that Israel already has with Jordan and Egypt. And it would cool considerably any warming of the current relationships between Israel and other Arab states. Some commentators argue that this announcement is a political move on the part of Prime Minister Netanyahu. He needs another issue to rally his troops, they say. But they also argue that Netanyahu cannot afford to burn his bridges with the next US administration, which may not see things as Trump has seen them over the past 4 years. Of course, the history of this small stretch of land and the issues associated with it are painful and complex. Stepping into these areas is a minefield, particularly for those of us who are not Israelis. But in our lifetime, what have we witnessed? A young, open democracy that has increasingly viewed the occupation not as a temporary situation, but as a permanent goal of land grabs, dispossession, development of settlements, disregard of international condemnation, and the exertion of power and control over millions of Palestinians. Many of us have lifelong and personal connections with Israel through family, through extended residency in the country, through our deep attachment to the land, which is so integral to our history and identity as Jews. We are proud to be Jewish, proud of our survival, proud of the ethical teachings of the prophets, the compassion of our rabbinic tradition, proud of Israel's early history and achievements, in love with the Hebrew language and with the idea of a homeland for the Jewish people. And what makes this so unutterably painful for those of us who condemn and loathe the idea of this creeping annexation, this abuse of power, this unwillingness to bring Palestinians to the table to forge out a peace plan, is the travesty that is made of our Jewish teachings. If Israel is a Jewish state, then it makes hypocrites of us all. If Judaism teaches us not to oppress, not to disenfranchise, not to stand idly by the blood of our neighbor, then where do we all stand? I listened last weekend to the panel discussion at JW3, chaired by Dr. Edie Friedman of the Jewish Council for Racial Equality. It was not about Israel, but about racism. Black Lives Matter. One of the panelists was a woman called April Baskin, the daughter of a Jewish mother and African-American father. On the issue of racism, she said, "The challenge is surmountable. We need to go back and engage in teshuvah, repentance, and healing. There needs to be truth and reconciliation, correcting the harm that is done." Like the issue of racism, giving a voice to the Palestinian people is an issue of human rights. You cannot have one group preferenced over another. You cannot have one person kneeling on the neck of another because of who they are. Palestinian lives, like Black lives, matter. Dignity and human rights matter for every single human being. What will history make of us, Jews in the diaspora, who stand idly by while the rights of others are denied? Where are we going to stand? How are we going to work for radical change as liberal Jews, heirs to a prophetic tradition that instructs us to be just, compassionate, and fair in the way that we are with others? Let us ask ourselves how we wish to be judged in 50 or 100 years' time. Do we wish to be faithful to those prophetic teachings, or are we going to be like the 10 spies whose stories, based on lies and deception, stirred rebellion and violence among the people? If, as some consider, Netanyahu's caution and cowardice will prevent him from taking this fateful step on July the 1st, then there is a chance to prevent this moral degeneration by bringing Palestinians to the discussion table and restarting peace talks on an equal, bilateral basis. Human rights, justice, and the pursuit of peace must be the banners that we hold up high if we care for the future of a Jewish state.